Hello everyone, my name is Shambhavi. Hope you all are doing well. So basically, now today we are going to see that how just we do out the multi-threading with the help of the threads in the Python programming, right? So we are just gonna see that how do we do the multi-threading here, right? So let's get started with the things. So the very first thing that I'll be doing is that I'll be importing out the threading library. Okay, in actually Python 3 we do not import thread because thread does not works. Okay, so in that case basically what we do is that we import the threading. So we just write here import and here goes the threading. Okay, this is how actually we just import that, right? And after that even I'll be importing one module as well, that is OS, that is my operating system. The full form for this OS is actually operating system, right? Now that depends on you, you want to use this or not. The example which I'm taking, in that basically I just use it, so I have just written this OS here, that is importing out the operating system. If you want to add, if you do not want to add, then do not add. Okay, right. I'll be making out my very first function, that is div a1. Okay, I'm putting out the brackets. Okay, I'll be putting out the brackets here and the colon, right? My very first function that I'm making is a1, fine. Now what I would just do is that I would just use out a print statement here. Okay, print statement. Now inside this I'll be writing that let's say task 1, put out the colon, and I would just put out these braces because after this I'm just gonna use the function that is format. Okay, so I just want to use the format function, so for that I'm just putting out these curly brackets. So if I basically do not want to use them, I would not put out the curly brackets. Okay, so just write here format. Okay, I would put out the bracket here, and inside that bracket I would just put out the threading now. Okay, threading. So here it goes like the threading. Okay, just let me write out the R as well right here. Okay, this threading, and after that I would just put a dot here and I would just write here current underscore thread. Okay, threading dot current underscore thread. I will put out the bracket here, I will put a dot, and now here I will be just writing out the name, right? So that will basically help me to print out the task 1 which we have actually given out here. Okay, now next what I'll be doing is that I'll be adding one another print statement as well. So just write here print, and into the bracket I would just, let's say I would just write that id okay, id of task 1 is, let's say this is the thing which I just want to add here. Okay, put out the brackets here, the curly brackets. I would just come out here, I put out the dot, and I would just use out my format function. Okay, format. Okay, now into the bracket I would just use out the operating system because we want to get out the ID for something, right? So in that case I was just using out my OS, that is operating system module. I would just write here get and get PID. This get PID is basically helps us to get out the ID. Okay, as we just want to find out the ID of the task 1, so it will basically help us to get out the ID. Okay, so in that case this is the function that is get PID. It is used to help us to find out the function, find out the ID, and I will put out the bracket like this, right? This is how we will be making out this statement. The same procedure will be followed on for the def a2. Okay, I'll just make out the second function here, come back, and here, so def, and here goes the a2. I put out the brackets here, right, colon, and come on to the next line. In this also I would just write print. Now here I would just work with the task 2. Okay, so here goes the task 2, and put out the colon, the curly brackets, and after this I would just use dot, and here goes the format. Okay, and into the bracket I would be just writing threading dot. Okay, let me just come down so that you are able to see right here. So that is threading dot, and I would just write here current underscore thread. Okay, threading dot current underscore thread, and the brackets like this. Okay, this is how actually we just write. Okay, and after the bracket I would just put out the name here, right? This is actually how we just write out the things, and if we just want something we just write it out like this, right? The other thing that I would be just doing is that I just use a print here, and inside the bracket I will just write the ID of task 2 is, and I'll put out the colon and these curly brackets here like this. Okay, and after this I would just use out dot. Okay, dot format, and into the bracket I'll be using out that OS module. Let me come down right here. So OS dot, and that is get. Okay, that is get PID, the function that we have used above as well, right? Get PID is basically helped us to use out the function, right? Def a2 and def a1, and this get PID. Okay, now basically what I would just do is that I would be using out and making out my main function. So the calling of these functions I'll be just doing in the main function. But before that, let me quickly give you a recap what I have done. I have made a def function, that is a function that is A1. Okay, sorry, first of all, we had imported out the modules, the threading one and the OS, that is my operating system. After that, we had made a function that is A1, and inside that we had used the print statement. That one is my task one. Okay, I just use a dot, and after that I just use a format function. Inside that I just wrote current dot, sorry, that is threading dot current underscore thread name. That will basically help us to give out the task one. Okay, after that I wanted to print out the id, so in that case I just wrote out that sentence, and in the format function, with the help of my operating system module, that is os1, I just wrote use of the function that is get pid. So that is basically helping me to get the pid. Same procedure I have applied here for the A2 function which we have made. So in that I have printed out the task number 2. Okay. And I've simply used out the format function. Into the bracket I've just given the threading dot current underscore thread and dot name. Right. And I just want to print out the ID even as well of the task number 2. So I just use the format function os dot get PID. Get PID is basically help us for getting out the PID of that particular thing. Right, now just defining out my main function. So if underscore, okay, I just not write it like this, I will simply write main and hit enter. Okay, this is how we just define. Now inside this I would be adding out a print statement. So print, and here I am just writing that id, put out the colon and put out the curly brackets. Okay, after this I will just use that format function. Let me come down, write this. Okay, format, and into the bracket I would be just writing os dot get pid, os dot get pid. Okay, and this is my actually one of the functions. So I'll put out the bracket here. Come on to the next line. Here basically I'll be just writing inside the bracket, and here I'll just write, let's say, main thread. Okay, main thread. So here goes the main thread, right? Okay, main thread, and I would just put out the braces like this for this, right? And I would just even put out the colon if we just want, right? And after this I would just put out a dot, and again use out my format function. So format, and into the bracket I'll be writing threading dot current underscore thread, and put out the brackets and dot name like this. Okay, this is actually how we just write that out. Okay, just let me go once again above. Okay, write this. Now come on to the next line basically. Now what I would just use, I would make the two variables. Let's say one of this is t1. So in that I would just write, with the help of my threading module, I would import the thread here. Okay, with the help of my threading module, I will use out the thread function here. And into the bracket I would just pass that what is the first target. So my target is basically, first of all, that is my a1 function, that is calling of my function. I would put out a comma here. And after that, I would just write that what is the name. So let's say that is t1. Okay, I would come on to the next line. Here I would be adding t2 is equal to, again I would be adding that threading dot thread, and into the bracket I would be just adding my second target. So my second target is, let's say, a2. Okay, and what about my name? So let's say my name is now t2. Okay, I would just write it like this, t and then 2 here. Okay, this is what I have written. Now basically what I'll be just doing is that I'll be giving out the functions here. So let me just first of all come down this side right here. Now I'll be just using t1 dot start. Okay, t1 dot start actually will help us to start my thread, and here t2 dot start. So that will actually help us to start my second thread, right? And after this basically what I have, I would write t1 dot join. So this will basically help me to execute, first of all, finish up my first thread which is starting executing, right? And here I could add this t2 dot join. That will basically help me to finish up my second execution of my thread, and I would just run this now here for a while. Now basically just have a look that basically it is giving me the id is 18788. Okay, main thread is the main thread, task 1 is my t1, id of the task 1 is this, then task 2 is t2, and the id for the task 2 is this thing, right? So we had just written out all of these things using the thread, and here basically we had applied out the multi-threading. This is how, this is the place. Okay, this is the place where I have applied out the multi-threading, and this is actually how we just do out the multi-threading in the Python programming language using the threads, right? So basically I hope that this must be very clear to you that how we just apply, how we just do basically the multi-threading in the Python programming language with the help of some functions. I just use some function, I just basically use the main function as well, and even I just use some libraries as well, right? So I hope that you have got a clear and a fair idea regarding the multi-threading. right? We'll be practicing out some more questions in the next videos. This is all for this video. Till then, thank you and take care.